Hello, everyone, and welcome to the United Nations University Institute for Water, Environment and Health Science Talk series. In this, our 30th anniversary year, my name is Lu Yingwang, UNU-INWEH's Public Outreach and Education Associate, and I'm delighted to be your host for today's Science Talk. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, our Science Talks showcase the diverse policy relevant and interdisciplinary research of UNU-INWEH and our global network of experts. These sessions are designed not only to share cutting-edge science, but also to explore how that science translates into real-world solutions for water, environment, and health challenges around the globe. Today's session, like all our talks, is being recorded. The video will be made available in an open access format following the event. And you can find the recordings of all previous science talks on demand via our website and YouTube channel at unu.edu/inweh/science-talks. As always, we will conclude with an interactive Q&A session. Please feel free to post your questions in the chat at any point during the presentation, and we will address as many as possible towards the end of today's session. So today's talk is entitled Scaling On-Site Water Reuse as a Climate Adaptation Strategy for Urban Water Scarcity, Lessons from San Francisco. It is my great pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Ms. Nof Afghani. Ms. Afghani is a fellow in water governance and innovation policy at UNU-INWEH, where her work focuses on the equitable use of and management of non-conventional water resources, with an emphasis on climate resilience and inclusive access. Her research explores how innovative water solutions can be scaled effectively alongside the development of circular water economy approaches to address growing global water challenges. Prior to this, she worked as a project manager with ACTED, an international NGO, where she provided scientific and strategic guidance on water and sanitation projects for vulnerable communities. Her field experience in the Global South, combining with her work in international development, has strongly informed her research perspective. Ms. Afghani is also affiliated with the Verhoeven Institute for Systems and Innovation Research, where she works on sustainability, justice, and the twin transition. She holds a bachelor degree in civil engineering from the University of Jordan and a master's in integrated water resources management from the University of Applied Science, Cologne. She is currently pursuing her PhD at the University of Twente, focusing on equitable access to non-conventional water resources and evidence-based policy development. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Nof Afghani for today's science talk. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Luing, for the introduction, and welcome everyone. So today I would like to take you on a journey of about how San Francisco rewrote the rules of its urban water infrastructure. I've never been to San Francisco, but so a bit of context about San Francisco. It sits on a peninsula. It cannot expand outward. It faces chronic drought, and its Victorian-era water system was not built for a city that no longer exists. So what emerged is what researchers at Eawag, which is the Swiss Federal Institute of Aquatic Science and Technology, have called a lighthouse model. A replicable blueprint that other cities around the world can learn from. The data that was used to build this analysis comes from two research projects at Eawag, and my role alongside the Eawag team was to synthesize those different data inputs into the story that I'm about to present today. I would highly recommend to check the website and check the other lighthouse cases, which offer like a complete different perspective of how on-site water reuse systems were adopted. Such few cases like Bangalore and Hamburg are really worth checking, and you can check the website that is on this slide. So with that said, let's get into it. Before we dive in, let me frame what we are covering today. So we'll be tracing two parallel storylines here. The first one is the timeline. From early experimental initiatives to pilot projects to the current position of San Francisco as a leader in on-site water reuse. And the second is the how, specifically 3 enabling changes that made this transformation possible: policy shifts, technological breakthrough, and institutional redesign. So the core lesson here is that the technology did not just scale because it was good. It scaled because the city built the right ecosystem around it. And how San Francisco did that is what I will be presenting to you today. But first, let's explain what exactly are we talking about when we say on-site water reuse system. So think of it like a small water treatment plant that is built directly into the building basement. It captures 3 types of water: black water from toilets, gray water from sinks and shower, and rainwater from the roof. And then that water goes through into what is called here the treatment train. So the treatment train, it consists of 4 sequential treatment stages. First, screening, and then biological treatment with membrane bioreactors, ultrafiltration, and then UV chlorination. And the output is clean, non-potable water that gets pumped back into the building through a separate purple pipe network for reuse, for flushing the toilets or for irrigation. And the critical safety feature that is in these systems is the fail-safe. So buildings always remain connected to the city sewer. And in case of event of a system failure, the on-site water reuse system, it automatically diverts to the central sewer. So there is no public health risk. And this is a closed loop system. And according to some studies in San Francisco, it can already offset 65% of a building total water demand. But here's the central insight of our research project, that when you try to scale a new infrastructure or a new technology, you're not just deploying hardware. So you're entering into an existing, complete socio-technical system. And San Francisco's success is rooted for its development in those 5 distinct pillars simultaneously. Pillar number 1 is the system itself. It's the physical treatment train that I've just presented. And that's the part where most engineers might focus on. But as you can see, it's only 1/5 of the story. So pillar 2 through 5, institutional framework, financial arrangements, industry and market, legitimacy and knowledge, these are what actually determine whether a technology scales or stay in use. And now I will walk you through the key activities that San Francisco did within each of these 4 pillars. So pillar 2, institutional framework. As you may know or have experienced, getting permits in a city, in a big city, is usually troublesome. It usually means that you need to deal with multiple departments, you have conflicting requirements, there's no single point of accountability. And San Francisco institutional breakthrough was that they made one agency, which is SFPUC, the Public Utilities Commission, the central orchestrator of a 3-phase permitting process that previously required developers to navigate 4 separate departments independently. So we have phase number 1, which is the application phase. Here, they submit a water budget plan and a non-potable implementation plan to the Public Utilities Commission. One door. And then we have phase 2, which is the construction and permitting. The Public Utility Commission, they coordinate the encroachments permit, the plumbing plan checks, and the initial engineering reports with the three departments, which are Public Work, a Department of Building Inspection, and Department of Public Health. And they do that in parallel and not sequentially, and that saves time. And phase 3, which is the commission and operation, the cross-connection testing, the startup and the ongoing operation and monitoring, they are all managed under a shared Public Utility Commission and Department of Public Health framework. So the result here that what used to take developers years of bureaucratic ping pong now became a predictable and a structured pathway for them. And now moving to pillar 2, or no, not moving, we're staying on pillar 2, but moving on to the most important technical policy innovation that happened in San Francisco. So under the old regulatory model, the on-site water reuse operators, they needed to continuously collect physical water samples and send them to the lab for analysis, and then they were allowed to use such the water. So this means that this grab sampling testing was slow and it was expensive, and it created a compliance burden for small to medium systems, and it made them such systems to be financially unviable. So systems at a building scale was financially unviable for this regulation. And San Francisco, what it did is that it worked with public health authorities, they worked with academia and also with research institutes, and replaced this with a risk-based framework. So instead of testing the output water, you define log 10 reduction targets for pathogens at critical treatment steps, which are the 4 treatment steps in that treatment train that I've presented earlier. And then they use the digital sensors to verify that each treatment step is actually hitting the target and working fine. So the logic here is clean. So if every step in the process is confirmed to be working correctly, then the output is safe by definition. And then you don't need to test the end product because you've already proven that the process was working. And at the same time, the fail-safe is automated. So if any sensor at any stage of the treatment detects a critical control point failure, then the system immediately bypasses to the sewers, to the city sewer, until the issue is resolved. And by that, you protect the public health and you reduce the operation and maintenance cost. But as you can see, this is a very engineered and bespoke system, and that brings us to the economic side of the story, because this is where the model still has real limitations. So the financial drag is, the financial drag is real, and it's significant. I'm just receiving a notification that my laptop is about to restart. I hope that it's not. Okay, I hope that nothing. Can you still see my screen?
Yes, we can still see your screen.
Okay, so I hope that my laptop doesn't restart suddenly. But anyways, let's go back to where I was. So moving on to the economic sides of the story, the financial drag is real. So those are high engineered systems, and that means that there's high upfront installation costs, and there's also ongoing operational costs for maintenance, for energy. And the reality check here is that the payback period to install such system is big, and it only makes sense for large-scale premium developments that are over 100,000 square feet. San Francisco did try to counteract that. So they introduced 3 instruments. first they introduced a 1 million grant program for offsetting the capital cost, but not the operational cost. And that was for voluntary early adopters, not for the ones who were mandated to install such system. And they also reduced the capacity charge because buildings that have an on-site water reuse system mean that they will use they will draw less water from the fresh water grid, and they will send less wastewater to the wastewater treatment plant. And for that, they lower the development fees for the developers. And lastly, the long-term process of having lower utility bills. However, the gap that is between the financial cost and the financial lift is still very significant, especially for smaller buildings or for lower income communities. And this remains a serious barrier for adopting those solutions. So alongside institutional changes that San Francisco did, alongside regulatory changes that they did, a new type of business model also emerged in San Francisco market. And it's called the design, build, operate model. So a design, build, operate firm is a company that not just install an on-site water reuse system and leave. No, it's design it, it's build it, and then it stays it stays to run it under a long-term service contract. And this solved two critical problems in San Francisco. So, for example, first, for developers, the design, build, operate firm, they handled the whole permitting process. So the developers at the end needed to just only deal with one contractor instead of three contractors at different times. And this means that time and complexity, they drop. And also for the city, it meant that such firms resolved the operator shortage problem. So to run such systems, you need a class 2 wastewater operator to run such systems, and such operators are extremely scarce across the US. So the DBO firm, they bring their own certified operators as part of the contract. But the most powerful aspect here is what this slide refers to in the center as the magic loop. Because the same firm that designed the system also has to stay and live with the operational consequences of that system. So that is a huge financial incentive to actually build systems that are not only efficient and meet the goals, but are also cheap to run. And then the real-world data of implementing those systems and running those systems then feed back into better designs. And by that, the industry improves itself. Again, moving now to legitimacy and knowledge, which is the pillar 5. So technology, having the right technology, having the right regulation, they can get you to pilot projects. But to reach this systemic scale, you also need human capital. You need to have trained people at every layer of the socio-technical system. And the Public Utilities Commission, they did not just position themselves as a regulator, but they positioned themselves as a hub of a knowledge network. And that network connects 4 communities at the same time. It connects universities, operators, NGOs and consultants, and regulators and utilities. The universities, they provided the technical and scientific validation for the system performance and life cycle energy use, which also provided also backed the changes in regulations. And the NGOs and the consultants, they took that knowledge and translated into user-friendly practice guides for architects and for developers, and which helped in developers to install such systems and to understand how such systems would work. At the same time, critically, San Francisco Public Utility of Commissions, they also collaborated with the Water Environment Federation in order to launch a comprehensive national training and certificate program for on-site water reuse operators, and by that try to resolve the critical skills gap. And most ambitiously, they also chaired the National Blue Ribbon Commission, and by that, San Francisco was no longer only learning, but they were also channeling that local knowledge to teach the whole country, and on how to adopt new standards for water reuse. However, new technology can also fail if the public does not trust it enough. And when we say recycled wastewater or recycled toilet water, it's not a phrase that usually generates enthusiasm. So San Francisco did address that heads on with two strategies. The first one was ensuring radical transparency, so ensuring there is public visibility. And San Francisco Public Utility Commissions, Public Utilities Commission, they installed their own system in their headquarter, in their publicly accessible headquarter, and where they were treating 5,000 gallons per day using nature-based wetlands. And by making the technology visible and demystified, they normalized what maybe once felt something strange or alien. The second one was the corporate signaling, the corporate validation. So in San Francisco, companies like Google, Meta, and Microsoft, when they voluntarily installed on-site water reuse system in their own campuses, suddenly having an on-site water reuse was not a compromise, was not a regulatory burden. It was a marker of premium and cutting-edge building design. So to summarize and to zoom out a bit and look at the full system dynamics here. So San Francisco started all of this with an Article 12C, where they mandated systems to build large buildings. So it mandated large buildings to build on-site water reuse system. And this was a progressive regulation. And having that regulation guaranteed a market demand. And that demand attracted the emergence of DBO firms. And then with time, there was operational learning and skills, so cost dropped and the technology improved and the skills rose. And having successful projects created a legitimacy which validated this model for skeptics. And from there, the standards expanded statewide and nationally. So each step reinforced the next, and the regulation, what is important here, that the regulation did not wait for the market to develop spontaneously. It actually created the market intentionally. And here is like one very important policy design lesson that applies far beyond water systems. So let me close today's presentation with the big picture. Again, in 2012, a local experiment in San Francisco, they passed this local ordinance that required large buildings to think differently about water. And then 14 years later, its risk-based framework is now actively reshaping California Water Code and redefining the national standards for decentralized water reuse. And this gives us a lesson that how cities can approach and how they can lead sustainability transitions. Cities don't need to wait for a national consensus, but by building locally, by proving that the model actually works, and then exploring the blueprint, this is how they can lead sustainability transitions. And with that, I finished my slide, and I look forward to your comments and your questions.
Thank you so much, Nof. Thank you very much for the very insightful presentation. It was really valuable to see how you trace the evolution of on-site water reuse in San Francisco from a local policy intervention into a broader model of urban water innovation, and how this transition depends not only on technology, but also on governance, financial structures, and social acceptance. You've really showed us how scaling such systems requires coordination across multiple five dimensions of the social technical systems, and how regulatory, institutional, and market mechanisms interact to enable that shift. With that, I'd like to open the floor for a few questions. Do we have any immediate from the room? Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you so much. That was really interesting. I lived in the Bay Area for 4 years, and I've always been curious about, like, I have heard of this project, so really appreciate your presentation. I have 2 questions for you. First, it seems like a lot of this is really dependent on strong local leadership and, you know, this kind of continuing support. So if you're trying to replicate this program in another city, how much of this do you think is really down to a technology change, and how much of it is like the regulators and kind of building trust on a social and human aspect?
Yeah, so that's really the nice part of this project, because we really looked, or the project looked into very different cases. And I feel like to replicate what happened in San Francisco, you need to make sure that wherever it's going to be replicated, there is a very strong compliance to laws and regulations. Because by passing this law, San Francisco made sure that certain buildings are forced to adopt such systems, and that having that created everything that that happens afterwards. And so for other cities that are to adopt what happened in San Francisco, I think like you need to make sure that compliance is very low compliance is very high in such cities. And for other cities, I think they will be like where low compliance is lower, maybe will be more inspired by other cases than San Francisco.
On your point about compliance, from a risk perspective, in this kind of system, who ultimately is responsible for, you know, if a system like this fails? Is it building managers? Is it the Public Utility Commission?
So in the case of San Francisco, I mentioned that there's a fail-safe. So in case, like the public utility made sure to have such a fail-safe. So in case the system is not working, it automatically diverts back into the sewer system. That means that all new buildings stay connected to the sewer network and to the freshwater network. So there is no like disconnection completely, and all buildings are forced to like maintain such systems. And in the case of San Francisco, it was, as I said, like the operation and maintenance continue to be under the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission. So it's under their radar. It's never disconnected completely. And that's why compliance here is very, very important, because such system always need to prove that systems are running. And that's why that increase the costs of installing and running such systems, and make it only a luxury for big development projects or big buildings, and not just for smaller or low-income community projects. Which is, from my opinion, is a very big limitation for those projects, because water resilience should not be a luxury. It should be targeted for all, and it should be also targeted for, especially for low-income communities who are even more susceptible or like vulnerable to water risks.
Thank you, Nof. I'm very much echoed with what Miriam's been asking about the trade-offs between regulatory compliance and this technical construct of such innovative urban infrastructure in cities like San Francisco. And so my trade-off is focused on the public incentives. versus the financial structure. So basically, you've outlined how scaling on-site water reuse depends on aligning technical, institutional, and financial systems, and particularly the balance between upfront capital investment and long-term operational costs.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to pick up on that financial pillar in more detail. To what extent is on-site water reuse financially sustainable without policy support, especially given this tension between high upfront capital expenditures and long-term operational costs? Do you see this balance eventually become market-driven as technologies become mature, or will it continue to rely on public incentives to bridge the initial capital expenditures gap?
Yeah, so in San Francisco, it showed us, like the case showed us that those systems are sustainable and they are running without policy support. So the one policy support that San Francisco provided, which is for installation such systems, and they provided it for systems that do not meet like the regularity requirement to already install. So they are like early adopters of such system. But the operation, they did not support that. So any system that is running now in San Francisco is running not through policy support. And it proved sustainable in large buildings. So in buildings that are larger than 100,000 square foot, where like 65% of the water demand was reduced, and this was supported by academic and articles and by studies that proved that it is sustainable and it's running. Of course, the cost was distributed. Those are like the buildings that adopted such systems were like luxury buildings, and the system price was just distributed in the price of the apartments, or in the price of renting such apartments. So it was like hidden, you know, in the price. But it is sustainable and it's running. But how to run such systems and how to run such bespoke engineering, very expensive to run systems at a lower income community, I think that's a question that needs to be like explored, because definitely it will need policy support.
Thank you, Nof. Do we have any other questions coming up from our table? Yes, please, Robert.
Thank you so much for a very interesting presentation. I really appreciate the presentation of the entire trajectory, you know, from conception to scale. We're doing some work looking at the process of the innovation process of how you take an innovation from conception to scale using behavior-centered design. And you know, through the presentation, I could notice there's so many different behavioral methods and levers that were utilized throughout the process. And I'm just wondering if at the front end of the process or during, did you guys use any kinds of frameworks when thinking through, you know, the overall trajectory? And if you could just maybe talk a little bit about some of that.
Yes, so the paper where we explain the framework that we used has actually been accepted recently, and it's going to be published, and I'm very happy to share with you that. And I share also your interest and your enthusiasm about such theories of how innovation actually, like from the start, and how it gets scaled up, because like I'm an engineer and I've never thought about like this whole system thinking, because at the end that's what decide if innovations or if certain technologies actually get scaled up or not. Basically we base our like theory thinking in a theory called multi-level perspective, which is a transition theory, and I'm very happy like to share more resources from those studies.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nof. Do we have more questions? If not, I would like to follow up with another balance between so beyond governance and finance. Another interesting dimension to mention in your slides is how legitimacy and social acceptance are built through visibility and signaling. Do you think that the normalization of the black water recycling has been driven more by regulatory frameworks or by symbolic adoption from these high-profile corporates you mentioned, and architectural projects that position on-site water reuse systems as the premium sustainability feature?
I'm very sorry, Liuing, but it got disconnected a bit, and I missed your full question. So can you please repeat that?
Sure, no problem. So beyond the governance and finance, another interesting dimensions is that how legitimacy and social acceptance are built through visibility and signaling. Do you think the normalization of black water recycling has been driven more by regulatory frameworks or by the symbolic adoption from high-profile corporates and architectural projects that position on-site water reuse systems as the premium sustainability feature?
Yeah, no, I don't think it's the primary driver beyond adoption, but I do believe that it really helps a lot. And I think especially like considering cases where there will be lower compliance, letting people understand how such systems run and what is the public health risk what is the public health risk of using them, and how we need to make sure that they are running safely, and how we need to make sure that they are monitored and they are working perfectly. This is very important. So public trust and public acceptance and public knowledge of how such systems run is very important, whether it's a case or a city where there's a high low compliance, or with a city of low compliance, because only then, when you understand that such systems are safe to run, and if in any case something wrong happens, it's still safe to run, and then that will make sure that people adopt it more. And what San Francisco did by installing their own system in an accessible lobby where people could come by and join educational tour of how such a system runs, and making sure that it's it's accessible, and yeah, it works. It's not as risky as I thought before. Then that changed a lot. That's a very huge factor in adoption.
Thank you, Nof. So zooming out from these trade-offs and complementarities between different dimensions, we might connect back to this climate framing. So to what extent do you see on-site water reuse become a mainstream climate adaptation strategy globally in, say, in the next 10 to 20 years?
Well, I do hope that it comes mainstream, because I mean, we are now living in a world where there's a lot of aging infrastructure, and that aging infrastructure make access to water really very slow in very slow, because you need to replace and then install new infrastructure, and the cities are growing and growing and growing, and then offering these decentralized solutions put less pressure on a very pressured network. So I think we always, as it was shown, we need to be connected to a centralized system in case of any failure happens, because at the end you need to make sure that the resilience is building up and not building down, and decentralized solutions can do that. They can ease the pressure on centralized systems that are aging, but at the same time give people access to available water that is not dependent on how the weather is or how the climate is going.
Yes, I totally agree with that. So thank you again, Nof, so this gives us to the end of our Q&A session. If not,
Okay, so
oh, sure, of course.
thank you so much. Sorry to give you so many questions.
No, no, I'm happy.
The first thing I think about, thinking about the Bay Area is earthquake risk. How did you guys design these? Was that something that factored into, either seismic risk or like the public safety power shutoffs in the case of, high wildfire risks? Were those designed into your system?
And like you mean into the system of on-site water reuse, or?
Yeah, like say if you have a massive, earthquake that hits, do you need additional like electricity supply, or how does this kind of system work in that type of emergency situation?
Yeah, so like I really haven't seen one, and I haven't been in San Francisco, and I'm not sure how the technical design is, but those are very important questions, and I feel like we looked more into how those solutions were actually adopted, but not into the technical functioning of them. But so I'm not sure if there's an answer for your question out there. Yeah, but like the only critical safety feature that I focused on was that the system, even in case of anything going wrong in the system itself, in the treatment stages, then it's bypassed to the city sewer. But I'm not sure in case of like natural hazards, what happened to the system. So I cannot answer you. But it's a very important question, I feel.
Thank you.
Thank you, Miriam. Thank you, Nof. So this really brings us to the end of today's UNU-INWEH Science Talk. If you enjoyed the session, remember that all our previous talks are available on our website and YouTube channel at unu.edu/inweh/science-talks. Feel free to revisit or share them with your colleagues. We'll be back next week with another exciting presentation exploring new ideas at the intersection of water, health, and environment. Thank you all for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you at the next Science Talk. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Bye-bye.